Elie and Marion Wiesel's son and chairman of the Elie Wiesel Foundation, Elisha Wiesel, joins us now. President Biden invoking your father there, but also speaking at a really tense moment, both in the war, but also here in this country. I've been saying this for a while now because it seems to me the country kind of needs somebody to help it understand this moment. Is this what you wanted to hear from him?
This was an incredible speech by President Biden. I was actually at the very first Days of Remembrance speech ever in 1979. I sat in President Carter's lap as my father spoke to the audience. That is actually the moment that my father met President Biden. President Biden sent him a note afterwards, and they began a friendship. Today's speech was phenomenal. It was everything that he needed to cover, I think, for the Jewish people in this country to hear. He talked about family being the place where Holocaust education needs to happen and anti-Semitism needs to be fought. He talked about how his own father brought them to Dachau, spoke about it at the dinner table. That was a key part of his message. He spoke about 10/7, how what happened on October 7th is very much modern anti-Semitism, that's what drove these people to go in and murder 1,200 innocent people, do the terrible desecrations that they did to babies, teenagers, sexual violence, the unbelievable deeds. And then he called out anti-Semitism on campus, and he did it in a very, very direct and crisp way. He said calls for the elimination of Israel are genocide and effectively are the worst anti-Semitism you can be spouting. That's really, I think, what the country needs to hear. It's very centering, very important, very relieved the president did this today.
I want to play actually the moment that he does address the protests that we've been seeing on college campuses today. Listen.
We've seen a ferocious surge of anti-Semitism in America and around the world. On college campuses, Jewish students blocked, harassed, attacked while walking to class. Anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic posters, slogans calling for the annihilation of Israel, the world's only Jewish state.
I mean, the ADL is reporting that there is an 140% increase in anti-Semitic incidents just from 2022 to 2023 and increasing after October 7th. When you see these figures and then you hear the President of the United States having to even make a speech like this in the year 2024, that strikes such a chord.
It does, and thank God he's doing it, and thank God he's doing it from within the Democratic Party, because there are irresponsible legislators within the more extreme fringes of the Democratic Party who are 100% part of the problem. It's interesting, J Street, which is about as left as you get in the Jewish world, they have decided not to endorse Jamal Bowman because he uses words that are so charged, so loaded, they can only be seen as anti-Semitic in nature. Jamal Bowman goes and he supports the protesters, who are calling for the elimination of the state of Israel and says, oh, yeah, this is all peaceful. I don't see anything peaceful as a Jewish person when I see banners and slogans and a call to globalize the Intifada. For those of us who remember what the Intifada was in 2000 and later in the later 2000s, these were bloody, murderous attacks, buses being blown up, the Sbarro pizza bombing. So there's a lot of irresponsible behavior that's coming from some of the further fringes of President Biden's party, which is why it's so important for him to make a strong message.
At the same time, there is a war going on, and Israel is a close ally of the United States. Every time President Biden has tough words for Benjamin Netanyahu, there are definitely people on the right who say, oh, he's giving in to the far left, he's anti-Semitic. Is that unfair in your mind? Is there room for President Biden to exert pressure on an ally in this circumstance and still be a strong ally to the Jewish people?
Of course. And President Biden has every right to tell Prime Minister Netanyahu what he thinks, what his views are. Ultimately, it's going to be Israel's responsibility to decide how to execute. When we come to words and discussions between friends, and I do believe that the friendship between Israel and the United States is as profound a diplomatic friendship as can exist. Actions are what matter, though. And some of the reports, when we hear that aid may get conditioned, that certain weapon supplies might be stopped, that's when I think the advisors around President Biden should just take a moment and think a little bit about history, because there is precedent for some of this. My father, at that 1979 speech, made a very, very central point about bombing the tracks in Auschwitz. Roosevelt's advisors did not agree that the bombing of tracks in Auschwitz was a military priority. Well, right now, I will tell you, as someone with family in Israel, as someone who's concerned about the civilians there, the Hamas terror tunnels that still exist in Rafah represent a threat in the same way that those tracks into Auschwitz represented a threat to European Jewry. And they need to be dismantled. That Hamas terror infrastructure needs to be taken apart. So I very much hope that, President Biden's advisors are thinking about that as they make their own decisions about how to proceed.
It's a very powerful conversation and insight that you've given us today. And I do think it's so important that you heard it tonight as well. Thank you.